bit about yourself and the Sunday Gathering?
Sure, yes. So I'm Annie, and the Sunday Gathering is something that has been a dream of mine for several years and is now coming to life, and I'm really excited to be here to talk about it.
Well, what is it as a concept, as an idea, the Sunday Gathering?
Yeah, so the Sunday Gathering, it's a very simply put gathering on a Sunday. So on a Sunday afternoon, bringing people together to explore what does it mean to connect with ourselves, with each other, and with something greater. So it's, for me, a space that is meant to be non-dogmatic. So there isn't a particular affiliation with it. It's really a space to explore what does it mean to be human and to do that together.
Great, thank you. That's a great description. Maybe you can tell me a bit about your personal journey and how that might have influenced the way you've set up Sunday Gathering.
That had an enormously huge influence on how this came to be. So it is a very important question. So as you may hear from my accent, I'm American originally. My parents are American, but when I was 3 years old, we moved to Europe, and I grew up in France as a child, later Belgium, Brussels, since I was a teenager. And the reason for all of that is because my parents moved here as Christian missionaries. So my dad was a pastor in a church, and my mom also worked in the church, and and it was an evangelical kind of strand when I was growing up, and later on it was more non-denominational, but that's also why they moved to Brussels. So for me, growing up in a church was a very important part of my upbringing, being part of a community. What I really loved about it was that we were actually a really diverse group of people, especially where I grew up in France. It was on the border with Geneva. So people were from all over the world because they were there for the UN. It was intergenerational, and it was the place where I really felt at home. Every Sunday I would find people who loved me and cared about me and were looking after me. So there was a lot that was highly beneficial to my upbringing. But later on, as I grew older and as I became a teenager, some of the sense of the rules and the dogma became very tight and constraining to who I was becoming, or who I always was, perhaps. And at one point, it just became too small for me, and I had to choose for myself to let go of the label that I had been wearing for my whole life of Christian. And so that's when I was about 18 years old, and I was at that point in Bible school, so it's quite a bizarre place and time to make a decision, but that's where I decided to try what it would be like to do something else and to explore life a different way. And to be honest, it's a very long story. It's been one of the biggest sort of journeys of my life, untangling all of that and what that meant to me and how I could make sense of that for myself and heal also from a lot of the what I would call religious trauma that I went through. But at one point, when a lot of that healing process had done its work, or I had done a lot of work on it, I came to the realization that I was still missing the sense of community and that sense that I had as a child of being together around a lot of people who were happy to be together on a Sunday and around something that had meaning. I just didn't want the other parts of it. So that's the story.
Thank you. And you mentioned community, but there are other communities, right? Why didn't you subscribe to one of those communities? What drove you to create the Sunday Gathering as a unique experience?
I tried many communities. Indeed, there are many, many. And in the period of time when I was traveling around South America and when I was reading a lot of different books, I was feeling for myself, okay, what would it be like if I was more in a Buddhist community, or if I was more in an ecstatic dance community? Like, there's so many ranges, of course, of every different flavor. And I think that's what I started to realize, is that there's so many different kinds of communities, but there's sort of a lack of one place to bring them together. And that was what I was hoping Sunday Gathering could start to create, as a place that could bring people together across different communities, especially in what we would kind of call the modern spiritual communities. So I'm thinking a lot about like ecstatic dance and meditation and yoga. People are finding this to be really meaningful in their lives, and they're going to these different locations and events and workshops and retreats, and they're finding those communities for those limited periods of time, but it's also often divided by interest group. And so my desire was to create a space that's really about bringing those together, sort of bringing them, bridging and learning from each other, which also then includes trying different things, perhaps. So that's one of the things that we do at the Sunday Gathering, is different kinds of practices that allow for the exploration of connection to ourselves, each other, and something greater.
Sounds wonderful indeed, Annie. I want to ask you a particular question about traditional religion. A mutual friend of ours explained what you're doing as church without God. Maybe it isn't altogether that, but how does it differ from traditional religions, Sunday Gathering?
I love that question. I think in some ways I would love for people who are also potentially religious to feel comfortable in this space. But the main desire is to break free of the construct of some one thing being right, and then other things being wrong. So this idea of we have the truth, we figured it out, we know it's our God, it's our rules, it's our way of being, and all of the rest of them are heathens. This is, I think, not at all what we are living in. This is not the reality in my understanding of it. I think it's much wider, much more mysterious than that. And so to pretend that we kind of have it all figured out, which is what I see happening often in traditional religion, it defeats the purpose, I think, of really of experiencing something else. And this something else requires a not knowing. And in traditional religion, I think perhaps at the base, they were meant to invite people into a deeper essence and a deeper mystery. And that's why you have some, mystical strains of every religion. In Islam, you have the Sufis. In Christianity, you had kind of the early church before it got co-opted by the Romans. Or you could even look at the Quaker community today as being sort of a mystical Christian strain. And these are always the parts of traditional religion that are less about the rules and the dogma and the right and the wrong, and more about the inner experience of being connected to something divine, something sacred, or something even nameless. And that's kind of the thing that I really want to explore.
And how do you encourage the participants at the Sunday Gathering to do that connection, and connecting with what?
These are the questions that we're exploring, actually, because it's for me still something that I'm discovering for myself. I had to unpack the word God throughout this journey that I've been on. So God for me was a very heavy, loaded, weighted word that had very specific meanings and connotations. And over the last years, I've come to see the word God as pointing towards another reality. Sometimes I like to think of it as more the good. You just add an O in there and it makes it much more palatable. But something in us that can see beyond the confines of the limited reality that we are in touch with. So this sense of everything being, there's this, I don't know, there's this control that we like to think we have over our lives. And it's easy to also get really stuck in a 9-to-5 job and the busyness of things, and to kind of come back to a mysterious, like, what if there's something more? That's the questioning. And so how do we do that? I think it's, for me anyway, very concretely about offering different practices that people can try and explore for themselves. So I call them pathways to connection. And the pathways to connection change every time. So every Sunday gathering, I invite different guests and guides to come and share what they themselves have experienced as a way to connect with either themselves, others, or something greater. And that can vary from dancing to yoga to untangling prayer and rediscovering what that could mean outside of a religious context. Or we had a woman once who was an artist, and she does beautiful art, but she's also a conflict resolution mediator. And so she brings these two things together and explores how can we learn from the creative process about our relationships and about how we approach relationships. So there's so many ways. I think for every single person, there's a different pathway to connection. So what I'm creating is a space for people to bring and share that. And then for participants who might themselves also be guides at some point, to choose and feel for themselves, oh, maybe maybe I have some affinity with this and I didn't realize it before, and to open up new ways of experiencing connection. But I wanted to maybe come back to the question about to whom, is there a place to which this is directed? If it's not to God, then to whom? It's not defined. And I think that's what is, for me at least, important in this journey, is to leave that open, because everyone experiences that in a different way. And personally, I'm still trying to figure out what that means and looks like for me. It's a desire that I have that's very strong, and that's been since I was very small, to feel connected to something bigger, something like meaningful. And sometimes I feel that presence, and sometimes I don't, and I'm still learning how I can encourage that perspective more in my own life.
Okay, well, jumping into that idea of personal, your own personal journey and what is meaningful to you, could you maybe share a moment from Sunday Gathering that really touched you, especially in a meaningful or transformative way?
Yeah, honestly, the whole thing has been extremely meaningful and transformative. Just stepping into the acceptance of, oh, I'm finally going to do this after thinking about it for many years. And there were maybe, one is just the general sense of support from everyone around me that I've spoken to, that I've been in calls with, that have showed up as volunteers, that have been participants, that have been excited to guide sessions and practices. There's a resonance that I feel in the field, not only in Brussels, but beyond, because my contacts in Amsterdam, I had a friend who came for the first edition, and that was wonderful. But I think one of the things that really stood out to me was at the end of the first edition of Sunday Gathering. So I had no idea, of course, who was going to come and what it was going to be like. And out of the 20 participants, one of them was a girl who I had never met, who I'm not even sure how she ended up there, to be honest. And I shared a bit about my story and how this came to be. And at the end, she came up to me and said, I have a very similar story, and I have a very similar trauma. And I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you for doing this. And it was just that sense of, we are finding each other. We're not alone. We don't have to be alone, because people who leave the church tend to not really know where to go anymore. And there is a church-sized hole that cannot be filled by traditional religion anymore. And so finding that with each other in a new way is something that I find just very meaningful.
On that point of welcoming others, which it sounds like a wonderful story there, what are the actual things that you do to welcome people from diverse backgrounds and beliefs? Because I guess that's could be conflicting sometimes for some people. What do you do to make people welcome?
We have name tags.
Yeah. Good start.
We have name tags. And one of the main things is actually in inviting people to contribute in a way. So of course there's a possibility to contribute financially, but beyond that it's also a contribution of time or energy or ideas or skills, expertise. So in the first edition, out of the 20 people, I think more than half were volunteers that were helping set up the space, decorate the space, make food, make signs, welcome people, helping clean up afterwards. And that's, I think, a really important part of feeling like you are part of something bigger than you. You know, there's something that you as an individual can contribute and bring to a bigger space. And it's not about the consumption of, I have paid a ticket price and now I expect something back. It's completely, trying to turn that on its head. It's saying you are welcome as you are without paying anything. And if you would like to contribute something, there's many ways of doing so. So we also like to have a potluck at the end so people can bring food and share together. So after a kind of a whole afternoon, because it's a whole afternoon of meditating and doing relational exercises of like getting into contact with each other. Singing is a big part of my story as well. And then other practices that we have that change each time. Then we end the afternoon with this potluck. And it's a way for people to feel like they are, eating food together is the best way of getting into connection with each other. But I think a lot of it maybe also just comes from maybe my outlook. There's a sense of the way the things that I radiate, of course, are reflected in the field. So a lot of my openness is going to be reflected there. And I'm also curious to see if at some point that there, any kind of things emerge that I need to look at as a reflection of myself. So far, it's just been really beautiful and positive and life-affirming.
You mentioned music and singing, I think, but I'll ask you the question, what role does music play in the Sunday gathering and more specifically, creating a sense of community?
Music for me has always been a very important part of my life. I've been singing since I could walk. And my mom always tells this funny story about how when I was a very small child, and I was only a few years old, and we had people over at our house, a bunch of adults standing around and talking, and I wanted people to sing, and so I started, and my mom was like, no, leave us alone, the adults are talking, leave us alone. And so I go around apparently and just sort of like in my kind of bossy way, just pull people around, and they don't even realize, but all of a sudden all of these adults are standing in a semicircle in front of me, and I just say to them, and now sing. And so it's always been a big part of my life, but especially my church life. Like singing there is a way of being together. It's a way of the word we would use in that specific situation was worship. But there is something that would happen when I would sing. There was a feeling of openness and a feeling of liberation that when I left the church, I did not have anymore. I actually stopped singing for 10 years. This moment that I would call the spiritual desert that I was in, where I wanted nothing to do with religion, with philosophy, with psychology, with spirituality, nothing. But then there was a moment when I went to South America and certain songs opened something up in me again. And I was invited to a place to do a practice called kirtan, which is a chanting of Hindu mantras. And when I went there, I cried the first time that I was there, and I thought, this is what I want to do. And funny thing was, after this trip to South America, which was a long journey in itself, but I came back to Brussels. I went to a kirtan here with a friend. I met the woman leading the kirtan, and I told her, I want to do what you do. And she said, great, I'm leaving in 2 months. Can you take over? So I got handed this group, basically, where I started every week leading singing circles. And this grew and grew and grew, and this was 6 years ago, and this kind of became, in a way, my thing. But my thing was not just singing Hindu mantras, it was singing sort of sacred songs from many different cultures and traditions. So different languages, like there's a beautiful Hebrew song that I like to sing. There's songs that I've written that I sing with people, and I do this in many different spaces. But so when I was thinking of putting together the Sunday gathering, that felt like a very important part to have in there, is to bring people together through singing, because also a lot of people know me that way. And it's been beautiful to see how that awakens something in people. You can really move energy around with music. So you can have different kinds of songs for different things. Sometimes there's a need for joy and exuberance and celebration. And sometimes there's a need for like coming back deep into ourselves in a meditative state and to anchor something important into our hearts. And songs can just do that. So yeah, and I wrote a song for the last Sunday gathering that I will gladly share with you later on.
Super, looking forward to hearing it. What other activities apart from music and song do you use during the gathering?
So we always start with a practice around connection to self, which could look like meditation, but it could also look like some sort of a body awareness, maybe shaking, some little thing that brings people into this present moment and into themselves. And then something around connection with other. And that can also be change each time. We had a funny game this past time where we together where two people had to tie a shoelace together of a shoe. And then we did some little questions that people answered to get to know each other a little bit better. And then we do this practice of connecting to something greater, where there could also be somebody who maybe speaks and shares about something personal. So far I have been sharing about things from my own life because it's the very beginning, but my intention is to start inviting other people to come to be guests and to speak about something that they've been learning. And then we sing together, and then there's this moment where people have to choose between 3 different practices. So where they deepen connection to self, to other, or to something greater. And so those change every time. They could be an ecstatic dance and something where they're invited to move more and to feel the emotions in their body. It could be authentic relating, where they are learning to get into a deeper level of connection with others through being in the present moment and speaking together. It could be going out into the forest and getting to know the trees and picking up leaves. It could be board games. It could be anything. And I think that's actually the point for me. There isn't a limited number of ways that you can connect with self, other, and something greater. And so after these kind of experiences that people have separately, they come back together in the bigger circle. We debrief a little bit. People get to share with each other what it was like. And we have a last kind of round of singing. And then we end with a potluck for those who feel like staying.
Sounds wonderful indeed, Annie. And it sounds wonderful that it's a community with other people and you're driving it. But how do you take care of your own inner needs, spiritual needs? How do you stay true to your own values while leading this project?
It's how to stay true to myself while still leading this, and how to stay connected with the why of this and not be taken over by other things is something that I'm really learning now. A big important part for me was setting up a team. So I have a few people that I've asked to be kind of team members. That doesn't mean that they're taking an active role necessarily in organizing things, but that they're there for me to go to when I have questions, when I have worries, when I have stress, when I have struggles. And of course, they also do lend their hands and hearts to the space. So these are people who I find I trust in different ways and who I've asked basically to keep me accountable. And I was really, really grateful, for example, after the second edition, when I did find that I was more stressed and I needed some support, and I was able the next day to have calls with 2 different people who just were with me in holding space for me, in asking me questions, in being with me as I let out some tears. And yeah, that's very important. But there's also this community that I have been a part of, sort of off and on for the last year, called the Quakers. So I've mentioned them before. They are sort of a mystical branch of Christianity, very different kind of space than what I grew up in. Non-dogmatic. It's definitely a community where you don't have to believe in a particular book or even a particular being to be welcomed there. And the way that they hold a silent space for together for going inwards is what I find really supportive for me. So whenever I need spiritual support, that's where I go.
Thank you for sharing that, Annie. My final question is simple. What are your hopes for the future of the Sunday Gathering?
I hope it continues and grows and flourishes and finds a home. One of my biggest dreams is to find a building, to have an actual building that can house not only the Sunday Gathering, but can be a larger community center, a place where people can come together and co-work and have breakfast and have different workshops and have spaces where people can rent the spaces for workshops or for giving massage treatments, for example. Like, it is a big sort of center that I'm seeing, that I already know that other people around me are also very interested in being a part of. So now it's about finding that space in Brussels and creating it so that it can find some stability and regularity, because now the Sunday Gathering, it's a once a month thing, and it's kind of depending on me. And I would love for at some point there to be a team of people that are making it happen, and perhaps it's happening every Sunday afternoon, and it's not requiring me to necessarily be doing it every time. So that's the dream, but I see it growing very easily to 80, 100 people even just this year. I feel like there's so much interest and longing and of people to have a space like this. So potentially this could also become something with a network across other cities as well. So that would be my dream.
Well, it's wonderful to hear that. I'm sure with your energy and your passion, you will achieve that goal. So thank you very much for your time, Annie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me here.
And now I invite you to maybe sing some songs for us, or play some songs for us.
Yes. So I wanted to share this song because it was written for the Sunday Gathering that we had. That was actually only just a few days ago. So it's called Together. Oh, we're in this together. We'll go through any weather. We just gotta remember that we're in this together. So please believe in we. Oh, we're in this together. We'll go through any weather. We just gotta remember that we're in this together. So please believe in we. We gotta wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, show up today. We're gonna wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, show up today. Oh, we're in this together. We'll go through any weather. We just gotta remember that we're in this together. And I want to feel deeper. I want to love wilder. I want to see clearer. I want to know more of myself. I want to know more of myself. And I want to feel deeper. I want to love wilder. I want to see clearer. I want to know more of myself. I want to know more of myself. Yeah, 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 yeah. I wanna know more of myself. 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 And I want to feel deeper. I want to love wilder. I want to see clearer. I want to know more of myself. I want to know more of myself. And I want to feel deeper. I want to love wilder. I want to see clearer. I want to know more of myself. I want to know more of myself.